This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 140 migrants die in shipwreck off Senegalese coast. China unveils plan for next 5 years and targets through 2035. We look at what's in store for China and Africa cooperations. And in Libya, displaced families return home following peace deal between two rival factions. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Egyptian and Sudanese officials discuss plans to build a railway link between the two North African countries. And in sports, CAF postpones Champions League semifinals second leg as COVID-19 hits Moroccan side Raja Casablanca. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin in West Africa, where at least 140 migrants have been confirmed dead after the ship they were sailing in caught fire and later sunk. The incident happened in the Atlantic Ocean off the Senegalese coast. According to the International Organization for Migration, about 200 passengers set off in the vessel from the Senegalese town of Mbour on Saturday for the Canary Islands in Spain. The IOM also said 59 passengers were rescued. According to the organization's latest report, 414 migrants are known to have died along the Senegalese route since the beginning of the year. It's urging governments to unite and dismantle illegal human trafficking networks.
IOM is calling for unity between governments and partners and the international community to dismantle trafficking and smuggling networks that take advantage of desperate youth. With the tragic shipwreck, at least 414 people are known to have died along this route since the beginning of this year. The data was compiled through IOM's Missing Migrant Project. And in all of 2019, it had recorded 210 fatalities.
And to China now, which is laying out its big plan for the next 5 years and beyond. The government sees these plans as vital for China's economic and social development. This morning, high-level officials provided details on how they are going to carry out the vision. Li Jingyi has more.
The newly released blueprints outlined key goals in major sectors. The government's vision for 2035 sets a deadline to achieve what it calls socialist modernization. It foresees a vibrant economy, robust technological capacity, and comprehensive national strength. In the next 5 years, the focus will be on the real economy, fostering healthy and high-quality economic growth. China will set up a new growth pattern with the domestic market as the mainstay and the domestic and international markets reinforcing each other.
The new pattern means emphasis on the domestic and international circulations rather than a closed internal loop.
Innovation will remain the key growth driver. Self-reliant technology is to support development.
We will improve our ability to make innovations independently and do our own things well because we cannot ask for or buy the core technologies from elsewhere. But at the same time, we hope to learn from advanced international experience and will share more Chinese technological outcomes with the world.
Rural areas will be given special attention. Agricultural modernization and food security will be the focus. As for the environment, the country will further promote sustainable development to achieve a balance in economic growth and ecological stability. China will work to ensure both development and national security. The country will enhance the national security system and capability to ensure economic security and the safety of people's life, and to maintain social stability and security. China will also make major strides in the modernization of national defense and the armed forces. The blueprint says China is committed to maintaining lasting prosperity and stability in Hong Kong and Macau, as well as advancing the peaceful development of cross-strait relations and national reunification. Experts say the blueprint outlines a comprehensive picture of the country's future.
That China is going all out to build a country on a modernized, harmonious and prosperous development path, and to improve people's livelihood and fulfill international responsibilities as a great nation.
Well, what happens in China in the next 5 years will have a profound impact globally. Africa, which has borne the brunt of the coronavirus pandemic economically, will be looking to strengthen relations with its trading partners, particularly China, in the post-COVID-19 pandemic period. Here's Professor Peter Kwanja, the president and CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, on expectations in terms of future cooperation between China and Africa under the framework of this 5-year plan and 2035 blueprint.
The major lesson coming from China is that African planning needs to focus on internal capacity. In other words, growing internal markets, growing internal productivity of economies. And that, as we try to see where the COVID-19 epidemic is going to push the world, and as the world tries to fight the epidemic. The second thing is that Africa need, obviously, to do some long-term planning. You can see China is talking about 2035, not just in visionary terms or in terms of a vision, but in terms of concrete planning. Obviously, Africa has Agenda 2063, which is the long-term blueprint for Africa's development or transformation. But we need to go beyond that, and at the national levels, begin to plan that way. I think in Kenya we have Vision 2030. Other countries in Africa have different versions, 2025 and so on. But I think the lesson coming from China is that at this critical time, when the world is battling the two problems of epidemics on the one hand and populism and isolationism and protectionism on the other, careful planning and looking inward into the economies in order to boost the productivity of various sectors is very key. That is another lesson learned. Obviously, the third lesson coming from China is that environment matters. Harmonizing development and stability of the environment, reducing emissions, reducing the pollution of our shared resource, which is the environment, is very, very important for the sustainability of the growth that Africa and China may be focusing on.
And to Cote d'Ivoire now, where incumbent President Alassane Ouattara is calling on his supporters to go out and vote massively and to also protect polling stations against troublemakers. Ouattara is running for a third term in the upcoming elections this Saturday. His main opponents have boycotted the campaigns. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar has the details.
Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara has spent the final day of campaigns urging his supporters to go to the polls.
I ask you to go and vote on Saturday. No one should stay at home. You have to go vote, and you have to protect the polling stations against those who want to create trouble. Cote d'Ivoire wants peace. We don't accept disorder. Those who want to vote have to vote. And you are all going to vote, aren't you? I count on you. I count on you. I count on you. Thank you.
The president and his opponent, Kwadwo Konan-Batin, are the only two candidates who held their final rallies. Since Ouattara announced that he would be vying for the presidency again in August, protests have broken out. His opponents say the move violates the constitution and have called on supporters to prevent the vote from taking place. Ouattara has dismissed these claims, saying the constitutional reform in 2016 allows him to reset the two-term presidential limit and run again. Supporters of Kwadwo Konan-Batin, on the other hand, say they want a younger leader.
Because he's young and dynamic. He's young like us. We don't want old men in power anymore. We want young.
Some people tell you, don't go vote on the 31st. At the same time, they tell you that Ouattara want to be president on the 31st. You know very well that the past 10 years, I have been constant and coherent. I have always fought against Ouattara. But the difference is that I will never point a gun against a man.
4 candidates will take part in Saturday's presidential election in Cote d'Ivoire. The government hopes that the elections will be free, fair and peaceful. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
Tanzania's ruling party, the Chama cha Mapinduzi, has taken an early lead in the country's presidential elections. Latest results show incumbent President John Magufuli, who is seeking a second term in office, in the lead with 85% of the 32 constituency results announced by the Tanzanian Election Commission. The main opposition presidential candidate, Tundu Lissu, has, however, rejected the results, claiming the vote was marred by irregularities. All right, let's shift our focus to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where more than 15 people have been killed by assailants in the east of the country. The attack, which happened on Wednesday night in the remote village of Bate, was allegedly carried out by rebel fighters from the Islamist militia group, the ADF. Leon Senyange reports.
The army confirmed the attack on Baiti village in the northern Kivu province. According to local officials, the church and homes were also burned down on Wednesday. Between 15 and 20 people were said to have been killed, but the army have so far refused to give an exact death toll. A civil society organization in the region has blamed the attack on rebels of the Allied Democratic Forces. The ADF is a Ugandan rebel group that is accused of killing more than 1,000 civilians in the eastern part of Congo territory since 2014. Congolese troops have been carrying out military operations against the ADF and other armed groups since October last year. The group's former leader, Jamil Mukulu, is on trial in Uganda. He faces several counts of murder, terrorism and aggravated robbery. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
We now head to Libya, where many families have been returning to their homes following a peace deal between 2 rival factions. Among them are 2 families who went back to their war-ravaged homes in Misrata. Here is CGTN's Susan Wangeli with the story.
Jewels of horrors of war. A painful reminder of a beautiful life now lost.
It used to be all green here. We would always want to sit out here. Dad, Mom and I would sit in the middle of the day and drink tea and enjoy the view of our crops, looking out at fruits and lemons. But then the war came and we fled. We couldn't stay here.
But there is hope for restoration. And this is what the Bauzid family is keen on, as it works on rehabilitating this farm, which was destroyed in the Libyan civil war. They lived in Misrata before fleeing as the war ravaged.
This needs 2 whole years to grow back. We've been back for 4 months, watering these trees since the war ended. We keep fixing things in the house for the past 4 months, and this takes so much effort. No one came here and offered to help us, not even to help us with 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 dinars.
In the opposite end of Misrata, still in Benghazi, another family is picking from where it left. As battles between government forces and troops allied to Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar deepened, they fled to the nearest refugee camp. They later moved to a room in a school. Upon returning home, they were confronted by shocking devastation.
There was no electricity, no water when we came back. It was damaged, of course, partly damaged. Some things were burned. We got here, moved back, called the electricians and water services. We started fixing things, one thing at a time.
For the returning families, questions as to whether the ongoing peace talks will succeed or not do not matter. They are banking on hope and living it, despite the dangers that lurk within the ruins of war which were once their homes.
There were indeed landmines. I personally saw 4 landmine accidents.
Libyan warring factions recently signed a long-lasting peace agreement. and local and the international communities are hoping that it holds. For a nation that has known no peace since the ouster and later killing of longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi, the latest peace deal is indeed a big deal. Susan Mongeli, CGTN.
Our coverage continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. Concern over a second wave as COVID-19 cases surge in some parts of Africa. And Europe's largest economy, Germany, orders for partial lockdown as the coronavirus cases increase.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. And Europe's largest economy, Germany, has seen a surge in coronavirus cases that forced the government to order partial lockdowns. The decision was not easy and was frustrating for businesses already invested in safety measures. Trent Murray has more.
A day after announcing Germany was going back under partial lockdown, Chancellor Angela Merkel arrived in Parliament to explain her plan. It wasn't an easy audience, with opposition MPs shouting at her across the chamber.
I understand the frustration and the desperation in these areas affected by the lockdown. The affected businesses invested in so many hygiene safety measures and are now asking themselves if it was all for nothing. I reply, no, it wasn't. These hygiene safety measures will be needed again afterwards, but during this current exponential rise in infections, they are not enough. At the moment, we cannot trace the origin of 75% of the infections, and we need to get out of this situation as quickly as possible.
From Monday, a so-called circuit breaker lockdown will start, lasting for at least a month. Bars and restaurants will close except for takeaway service. Gyms, cinemas and theatres will shut, and holidays will effectively be banned, with hotels instructed to refuse bookings from holidaymakers. Health authorities say it's a strong and necessary step to help fight Germany's alarming spike in new coronavirus cases.
This dynamic rate of current infections will overload our intensive care units in just a few weeks from now. All of this shows us that at the beginning of the cold season, we are in a dramatic situation. It affects all of us, without exception.
But a number of small businesses are disappointed, particularly those in the hospitality sector. They say they're doing all they can to help reduce the risk of transmission.
I'm angry and I'm frustrated. I mean, we've taken a lot of measures. We have separation screens. We've built the terrace up with extra heaters so that people can sit outside. Well, it's killing the business. I mean, we're already down 60% of what we should be turning over or would be turning over without the corona.
While authorities aim to ensure the country's healthcare system can sustain itself through the winter, experts warn of a chilling effect on Germany's economic recovery. New data out today shows German unemployment figures fell more in October than first expected, with the Labour Ministry saying job retention schemes and stimulus are helping lead to a faster recovery. But that optimism comes with a very big but, with economists warning a second lockdown will hit the labour market, and in doing so, slow the revival of Europe's biggest economy. The Chancellor says the economy remains a priority, but it will cost billions of euros to help ease the effect of the restrictions. For now, saving lives takes precedent as the pandemic makes a second deadly sweep across Europe. Trent Murray, CGTN, Frankfurt.
India has become the second country in the world to surpass 8 million coronavirus cases after the U.S. Officials made the announcement on Thursday. Our correspondent Ravinder Bawa gave us the latest situation. Let's take a look.
Even though India is inching closer to United States in terms of number, India has crossed 8 million mark. But interestingly, the daily number of fresh cases is going down. And the government says that because of the testing, the number of cases, which are the cumulative value, is going down. And we also have to see the R value. R value is which basically tells us how the infection is spreading, how many people one individual can infect. And this, interestingly, has remained below 1 for past 4 weeks. So that is something which the government is counting as good news. And of course, we know that the mortality rate in India has been the lowest across the world. India has opened up, and the 5 states which are actually causing more concern and problem are Delhi, West Bengal, Maharashtra, Karnataka and Kerala, and they are spread from in all 4 directions, north, south, east, west. And Delhi is actually spiking more, and the government is now concerned that with the festivity season which has begun and which will carry on till the end of this year, along with winters coming in, and in northern India the pollution, things are going to go worse in the next few weeks, we see. Even though we are seeing lower numbers now, but it might rise up. There is a concern that these cases might spike up soon.
COVID-19 cases are increasing in some parts of Africa, and the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is urging governments to step up preparations for a second wave. Now, over the past 4 weeks, cases have gone up by 45% per week on average in Kenya, by 19% in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and by 8% in Egypt. Meanwhile, the WHO Director General is calling for strong leadership by governments and other stakeholders in programs to tackle the virus. To further discuss this, we are joined by Dr. Nta, who is the COVID-19 Incident Manager for the WHO Regional Office for Africa. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Thank you for joining us here on the show, Doctor. Doctor, let me begin by asking you, how worried should Africa be, considering that the continent somehow managed to contain the virus in the first wave? Doctor?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today again. I really appreciate it. Yes, as you said, as you mentioned in your introduction, cases are going up in some of the countries, not all countries, but in some of our countries. So you can see in other regions that the country is really struggling with the increase of number of cases after they've gone through what some call first wave, or then now the second wave. So Africa should also be looking at that and really be cautious and do everything that we can to prevent that we go into resurgence. We call it the resurgence of cases. So it can come, it's real. But so far, I think African countries have done very well, and they should continue to do well so that we don't go into and we lose all the gain we have obtained so far and going into a real resurgence of cases in many of our countries.
All right, Doctor, there is increasing talk of reimposing lockdown measures in many African countries. It's clear that while Africa was not hit hard in the health sector, economically many countries are struggling. How do governments balance saving lives and protecting livelihoods? From your perspective, how do you see it?
I agree with your statement. I think African countries epidemiologically has been kind of a little bit spared. I mean, the magnitude of the outbreak is not as much as in other continents or other regions, but economically, I think we have paid a very high price in terms of impact, socioeconomic impact on countries, but also on many people, many households. So the leaders of our countries has to take that balance on the way to go in terms of preventing again the resurgence of cases, but meanwhile also protecting socioeconomically speaking our population. Now, what we advise as a WHO, if you look at the countries, the same way we don't have the same situation in all countries at the regional level, the same way the situation is not the same within a country. You might have the regions or districts or counties that are more affected than other counties or other provinces or other regions. So now the advice we are providing is for the countries or the national authorities to take a risk-based approach, meaning look at the risk in each county, in each district, and take the measures that are appropriate for that county, for that district, or even for that group of population, so that we are not imposing kind of a blanket measure to all the population and to all the regions.
All right, Dr. Ngoy Nsenga, let's leave it there for now. And thank you so much for your expertise on this subject matter. Thank you so much. Let's turn our attention to the World Health Organization, where the organization says one of its offices in Nigeria was broken into and some of its health equipment stolen. The incident took place during the recent peaceful protests, which turned violent across Nigeria. Correspondent Philly Haza reports from Abuja.
The WHO's African Regional Director, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, says some of the organization's personal protective equipment was stolen from one of its storage locations in Nigeria. She did not mention the exact location, but added that the PPE was meant to help fight against COVID-19 in the country. Dr. Moeti says the incident occurred during the protests, riots and looting in the last couple of weeks across Nigeria. Thousands of Nigerians marched on the streets for 2 weeks in early October to demand an end to years of police brutality, mainly carried out by now-defunct police unit Special Anti-Robbery Squad, or SARS. The protests turned violent when thugs started attacking protesters and destroying properties. The government has since imposed a curfew in the troubled areas and calm has returned. President Muhammadu Buhari has also ordered an investigation into the lootings and ordered that victims whose property was damaged or stolen be compensated appropriately. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, following a meeting of the National Committee to Combat the Coronavirus, the Tunisian Prime Minister Hichem Mechechi has announced a set of new measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. The ban on travel between regions and the suspension of classes in all educational institutions until November the 8th are among the main measures set to be put in place. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has the details.
Prime Minister Hichem Mechechi called on all governors to impose a curfew in all regions from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. from Monday to Friday and from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. during the weekend. The director of the National Observatory of New and Emerging Diseases and the spokesperson for the Health Ministry declared that the situation is alarming in the country.
This period is very critical. The number of victims and infections is constantly rising. The government has no choice but to impose new measurements to stem the spread of the virus. People must comply with the new health protocols.
The COVID-19 task force also decided to close the cafes and restaurants from 4 p.m. in compliance with the capacity set at 30% in enclosed spaces and 50% in open spaces. In addition, daily control campaigns will be conducted in all regions with the immediate closure of any premises that do not comply with the new measures.
Our goal is not to ruin business but to prevent people from socializing. We aim to save lives. The state will not tolerate any disrespect of the safety measures.
Moreover, all public and private events, including marriages and funerals, will also be suspended from October 30th until November 15th. Consequently, all gatherings of more than 4 people will be banned in public places, except for public transport.
The new measures are necessary, but they will have a very negative impact on businesses and the population. More people will lose their jobs, and even though the country has not yet recovered from the first wave of the pandemic, public health is a top priority. People do not feel safe.
The Prime Minister has suspended collective prayers at mosques for the next 2 weeks. The government also decided to exclude all purchases related to the fight against COVID-19 from the decree organizing public calls for tenders. This move will facilitate the purchase and distribution of personal protective equipment.
The COVID-19 task force has reaffirmed the need to adopt prayer gestures such as social distancing and the wearing of face masks. Authorities say control agents will ensure the rigorous enforcement of the health protocols by punishing all offenders. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, we've got your business lines coming up next in just a second. Don't go away. Here's a look at what's ahead. Aliko Dangote delays listing of his cement company in London. And Egyptian and Sudanese officials discuss plans to build a railway link between the two North African countries.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest person, has again delayed plans to sell shares in his cement maker on the London Stock Exchange. The billionaire is opting instead to focus on increasing exports and boosting the Nigerian company's foreign exchange reserves. Dangote Cement, the continent's biggest producer of the building material, isn't expected to attempt a UK initial public offering until at least 2023. The 63-year-old Dangote, who has a net worth of more than $14 billion, has long expressed his ambition for Dangote Cement to have a secondary London listing to diversify its ownership and gain access to cheaper funds in international markets. Tunisia's parliament has approved a $211 million loan agreement from the African Development Bank. The funding will help cushion the North African nation from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tunisia expects its tourism-reliant economy to shrink by 7% this year and its fiscal deficit to balloon to 14% of GDP. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Shawashi with the details.
The House of People's Representatives in Tunisia passed the draft legislation approving the decree law on the adoption of a loan agreement signed between the country and the African Development Bank. The €180 million loan is part of the Rapid Response Facility to COVID-19, approved by the African Development Bank on April 8th this year. 114 MPs voted for the agreement, which received overwhelming parliamentary support.
The African Development Bank has always been one of Tunisia's best partners even before the pandemic. The bank provides a funding for concrete projects which have a real impact on the population, like infrastructure, health, education, access to water and sanitization. The support of the AFDB is vital in these difficult times.
The loan aims to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 crisis through job preservation and social inclusion of vulnerable groups, youths and the poor in the short term and economic recovery in the medium term.
The loan we've approved is necessary to limit the negative repercussions of the pandemic on employment and the social situation. The number of people and businesses who were the first victims of the crisis is rising.
According to the COVID-19 task force, the AFDB loan will also be used to support implementation of the health response in the North African state.
The number of victims is on the rise. We feel the pressure on health facilities. That's why we need additional funding and financial support to provide the equipment and to improve the service at hospitals and to save more lives.
During a face-to-face and an online meeting bringing together representatives of a number of international financial institutions and donors financing Tunisia, Representatives of foreign banks, including AFDB, emphasized their commitment to further strengthen their role in enabling the country to better manage the current health crisis.
Since the outbreak of the pandemic 7 months ago, Tunisian authorities have mobilized over $500 million to help thousands of enterprises and millions of citizens. Experts estimate that the country needs an additional funding of over $1 billion to mitigate the negative repercussions of the pandemic. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Egyptian and Sudanese officials have met in Cairo to further discuss a project to connect both countries through railway and road links. The over 1,200-kilometer route will transport passengers between both countries as well as products and goods to foster bilateral trade and development. It is also the first phase of an ambitious project to connect Cairo with Cape Town City in South Africa. Here's Yasser Hakim with more details.
Egypt is speeding up the land transport connections with its southern neighbor after a one-year lull due to political upheavals in Sudan. Cairo has already constructed the railway infrastructure from Aswan to the Sudan border. When ready, the railway will link Egypt's Alexandria city on the Mediterranean Sea with Sudan's capital Khartoum.
The railway link will increase passenger movement, trade and cargo shipments with Sudan. Egypt is aggressively active in several African countries with infrastructure projects and investments in different sectors. Now it is pushing for the railway and road link to expand beyond Sudan and connect the whole continent economically, especially now there are countries with no sea access, so that they can transport their products via railway to different ports for shipping. I believe the land route will be the base to establish the dream of an African Union similar to the EU in Europe.
The cost of this railway link with Sudan has not been revealed, but Cairo says the Kuwait Fund for Economic Development will be an investor in the project. Like any project, there are some challenges that are being addressed by both sides.
There are challenges. One is technical. The two railway lines are different in width size, which makes it hard to link. Experts decided to construct the Sudan railway line according to Egypt's updated specifications. The other two challenges are funding and political will. Funding will be covered through loans and international funds. As for political will, it is obvious now, with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi pushing to finalize the project soon and the positive response from the current Sudanese leadership.
Besides the railway, there is another ambitious project for a land road that connects Egypt with Chad. Hassan Mehdi had been a board member of this project that's advising the Transportation Ministry.
It is part of the Cairo-Cape Town road that I have done feasibility studies on. Egypt has already upgraded the Asyut road and is developing the road from Aswan to Sudan borders. The road is very important to create economic integration between African countries, facilitating passenger transport and trade. It will add huge value to uniting the continent economically.
Intra-African trade has been much lower than the potential of the continent. Cairo hopes the railway and road routes could help raise trade and investment volumes, thus improving African economies. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Zimbabwe has seen a significant drop in inflation, which had soared to a 10-year high of 837% in July. Authorities now expect the inflation rate to end the year at 134%, more than halving the central bank's previous forecast. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe had previously forecasted the 2020 annual inflation at 300%. From Harare, here is CGTN's Brian Wakatuya with the details.
The rate at which prices of goods have been going up has slowed down in recent months, bringing relief to hard-pressed shoppers, but also emboldening Treasury officials, who had initially projected annual inflation to come down to 300% by year end, but have now halved that forecast. Monthly inflation is expected to perform even better.
The month-on-month figures are the ones that matter. And I think by then we might see single-digit inflation month by month, which will mean that we are really making a lot of headway compared to the figures of 70–80% month on month, sometimes 600–700% year on year. Those sort of figures are now coming down to much more reasonable figures. But even 3 or 4% a month is a high rate of inflation. What we want is 3 or 4% a year. And so we've got some way to go to get there, but I think we might do it in 2021.
Stability has been brought by a weekly foreign currency auction that has improved availability of hard currency at the official exchange rate. There's still a mismatch between the demand for and supply of foreign currency, which manifests itself in continued activity, albeit subdued, on the black market. Getting adequate foreign currency requires rebuilding productive capacity.
That means we need investors. And that means we need investment policies that are attractive to investors. Right now, the investors around the world comparing the conditions and the regulations and the restrictions and the licenses that we demand in Zimbabwe, they're saying it's easier to start a business somewhere else.
Over the last 2 years, Zimbabwe has stepped up reforms to improve the ease of doing business and to attract foreign capital. Government has also been keeping a tight leash on expenditures, including resisting unsustainable wage increases that could cause inflation to rise again. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Aviation giant Boeing says it's planning to shed another 7,000 jobs by the end of next year. The American plane maker reported its fourth straight quarterly loss on Wednesday, as sales are hammered by the pandemic and the grounding of 737 MAX jets. The company is focused on cutting costs as it prepares for a long slump in demand. While Boeing is adding some jobs in its defense unit, an estimated 19,000 employees are leaving the company this year. Executives from top U.S. tech companies have testified before the Senate in a contentious hearing to defend the way that they do business. This comes as tech giant Google faces a lawsuit from the federal government over concerns it's monopolizing the search industry. Our Mark Neo has the details.
We have contact with you.
The U.S. Department of Justice recently filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google. It accuses the company of unlawfully maintaining monopolies through anti-competitive practices in search and search advertising.
This new lawsuit against Google is really just the beginning of what is going to be an extended conversation in the United States about antitrust in the 21st century.
The civil suit says that Google accounts for almost 90% of all search queries in the United States. It also accuses Google of entering into exclusive agreements that forbid the pre-installation of competing search services.
Does the market sound highly competitive to you when you have 90% of it?
Very brief answer.
Many publishers can use simultaneously many tools. Amazon and Trade Desk alone have grown significantly in the last 2 years. This is a market in which we share majority of our revenue. Our margins are low. We are happy to take feedback here.
Feedback turned partisan as the CEOs of Google, Facebook, and Twitter appeared before a Senate committee on Wednesday. At the heart of the hearing was whether to remove or modify Section 230, a controversial internet law which prevents internet companies from being treated as the speakers or publishers of information provided by another information content provider. Republican Senator Ted Cruz blasted Twitter for blocking an article from the New York Post that claimed Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's son, Hunter, had dealings with a Ukrainian official.
Who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what the media are allowed to report and what the American people are allowed to hear? And why do you persist in behaving as a Democratic super PAC?
We're not doing that. And this is why I opened this hearing with calls for more transparency. We realize we need to earn trust more.
While all the CEOs agreed on the need for more transparency, Dorsey went further by supporting the idea of algorithmic choice, giving users more power over what content they see in their feeds.
And their algorithms are focused on engagement and growth, and not really so much on whether it's the truth or not.
Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal asked the companies whether they had plans in case President Trump says without evidence that the election has been rigged or calls for the counting of votes to stop.
We do. We have policies related to all of the areas that you just mentioned. Candidates or campaigns trying to delegitimize methods of voting or the election, candidates trying to prematurely declare victory, and candidates trying to spread voter suppression material.
Both Zuckerberg and Dorsey are scheduled to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee in mid-November to answer questions over their handling of the 2020 election. Mark New, CGTN, Mountain View, California.
Our coverage continues. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news. Here's a look at what's ahead. African artists draw crowds in Burkina Faso to help steer them through an exceptionally tough year.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. To some entertainment news now. And the Rikria Trails Festival is on the Burkinabe capital of Ouagadougou. The event is a mixture of poetry, music, dance, and art and brings together artists from across the continent. However, this year's festival expresses the realities of COVID-19 and an increase in intercommunal conflicts in the West African nation. Here's Robert Nagila with more.
The annual Rikria Trails Festival is on in Ouagadougou. It is one unique festival of art which brings together different forms of art to the neighborhoods of the Burkinabe capital. Giant sculptures, paintings, and other visuals form a backdrop of music, poetry, and dance performances. This year's theme is Standing Up.
It's a meeting of African creators, creators of theater, of music, of dance, of scenography. This year we chose Standing Up as a theme because we are going through difficult times, particularly in our country and around the world more generally. And it's important that artists invite the people to stand up for dignity.
One of the key performers in this year's event is Serge Aimé Coulibaly. He is a son of Burkina Faso who has established himself in Belgium. He performed a choreographed dance called Wakat.
Wakat means the present time. The present time that is not fun at all. We are messed up, like one of the actors says in the play. We are messed up and we are trying to find a different humanity through different ways. Why are there masks in society? Why do we need to believe in myths and in supernatural beings to help us move into a different stage in society? So I think it is my most spiritual play. It is where I seek to look inside our beliefs.
For local residents, this is one of the rare moments that brighten their days.
We are very happy to welcome them. They have come to share with us. We are very happy with their gesture. We will never be able to thank them enough.
Burkina Faso has been grappling with rising intercommunal conflicts. Herders and farmers have been involved in bitter confrontations over pasture, leading to deaths and displacements. The nation, like the rest of Africa, is battling the novel coronavirus pandemic too. These are some of the issues that are reflected in this year's event. Susan Mongeli, CGTN.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up in just a moment. Here's a peek at that headline.